Hello everybody, hope you're keeping well. In this week's video I want to discuss something a little bit different. We've talked about photography enough on this channel, right? We're going to be talking about interior and architecture video tips, in particular with the Canon R5 because it's what I shoot with, but to be honest with you, a lot of them are going to be pretty transferable.
For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is James Kerwin and this is me. I'm an architecture and interior photographer from the UK that is now based in Istanbul. I love shooting heritage, abandoned places, relics, ruins, hidden gems and ghost towns, as well as off the beaten path locations all around the world. You can catch my content weekly, well, when life doesn't take over. So why don't you join me for the ride by subscribing, and you can also check out my website in the description below.
In this video, I'd say at this point, if you're a kind of high-end videographer, it's probably not the video for you. I'm kind of a photographer primarily, and I only really got into video maybe 4 or 5 years ago after studying it for quite a while, and I'm by no means an expert even by this point. I kind of do the basics well and leave it at that, really. I would say the tips I'm going to give you are probably more aimed at the photographer looking to get into video, how to go about it, some gear, some lighting, some compositional things, as well as kind of actually taking stuff to site, and of course those ultimate settings that you're going to need to get decent interior and architecture video work as well. Okay, so the Canon R5 is what I primarily shoot with, and I actually have the Canon RP which I use for video as well. And ultimately they're kind of like a combination kit. You know, all of my lenses are interchangeable and enables me to kind of go out in the field, shoot primarily photography, but get video clips and of course videos for this channel on the side as well. Using an adapter, all of my lenses fit both cameras, they're both full frame, and they kind of have similar-ish capabilities, at least at 1080p. However, the R5 of course is a much more advanced camera, and it's my primary photography camera. I would say the first thing is, for you, you're going to want to make sure you've got a bundle of stuff, and you do as a photographer naturally. You're going to have your tripods, you're going to have lenses that are like creamy bokeh lenses, you know, the f1.8s, the 2.8s, all of the ones that you spent loads of money on, they're going to be the ones you need. The thing to look at is probably going to be your camera body actually, in terms of, is it capable of shooting decent video? I actually had the Canon 5DSR when I first got into video and started learning about it, and it was fine for 24p, still clips, just me talking to the camera. But ultimately, as I started to progress and get into more dark locations, shoot different style of video, I realized that it was no good at shooting certain things. And I'm going to move on to that into the second half of the video, but just check your camera, what video specs it has before you go out and invest in something else. Nowadays, most of the new cameras are pretty much hybrid systems. They're amazing at shooting both video and photography. Check out what yours does, check the specs on it. Let me know below, is it decent enough for both genres? So other things you're going to want with gear are going to be to do with like stabilizing the camera. Are you going to be filming yourself? Are you going to have somebody with you all the time? In which case, both of those things have pros and cons. Filming yourself is pretty difficult on location, and you're going to want for that, of course, a tripod, probably more than one. And that was the next thing I had to go and get. I needed to go and get a secondary tripod, even a third one, a tabletop one. And I even went out and bought a gimbal as well, thinking I'm going to have time to do all of this. And of course, I did not, filming myself. Are you going to want external lighting? For me, I don't take external lighting with me, but you might want to consider it for your type of video content that you're producing. For me, I rely mostly on my lenses and my camera's features to get me out of trouble in dark situations. Okay, so have you ever clicked on a YouTube video and the sound is absolutely horrendous? That's because it's the single most important thing for your videos that you're going to be producing. Make sure that your audio is amazing. There's things that I'm going to tell you about that people don't think happens. Number one is, as soon as you press record, there'll be people out there making all the noise in the world. Your doorbell will ring, the phone will go, external noise will come about. It just happens time and time again. It's so frustrating. I could be in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a field, and suddenly a farmer will start up his tractor. A helicopter will go over me. It's incredible. You've got to be patient, you've got to learn to live with it and just roll with it, and then re-record if you have to. The next thing is you want to get yourself a decent mic. Now, we want to talk about lavalier microphones. This is the one here that I've got attached with, unfortunately, this big muffle, this dead cat on here. This is what this is called. You're going to get one of them to sort of stop the wind affecting that microphone. You can get smaller ones than this, by the way. This is simply because I've lost the smaller one and I need to get a new one. So it's quite big and obtrusive, I suppose. You can get shotgun mics that sit on top of the camera. Now, they all have different kind of versions that you can get and they're good for different things, but ultimately you're gonna wanna get decent audio equipment. And that is probably the big investment for a photographer. Now, I have the Rode Video Mic Go system. It's wireless, one microphone. It sits in my pocket like this. It can record wirelessly with just a microphone in the top, but I prefer to plug in a lavalier mic. With this setup, the audio I get is more consistent and allows me to put it into my videos more consistently and at a decent level, which is really important. The next thing is you're going to want to make sure you're always clipping those audio cables in properly because it's a pain, and set your audio levels in camera. If you don't know where it is, it's usually in sounds. When you flick onto video, you go to sounds, you can go into your audio levels and you can check your audio levels. So talk to your mic, make sure your audio levels are set in camera and they're not peaking too high or too low. You want them roughly hitting sort of minus 12 decibels kind of every time you're talking, not over them dramatically and not well under them, just sort of peaking onto them and leave it at that. Trust me, I've been into locations so many times where it's been too high, too low, and it's kind of unrecoverable. Think of it as like noise in your photos when you go to then kind of like do the editing of the audio. If it's got too much noise in there, too much kind of, you have to lift it too much, it introduces more and more and more of that noise, and there's natural kind of ambience. It lifts it to a sort of unusable level, a bit like a photo shot on the wrong ISO. It's no different. Now for me, the next most important thing is going to be your camera settings, like how are you actually going to set this up? I'm always looking to shoot 24p. My slow motion is usually 60 or 120. But when you're setting your frame rate, you always got to remember that your shutter speed has got to be at least double to make it kind of, you haven't got motion blur on yourself. So for example, in this clip here, I'm shooting 2.8, focused on my eyes. It's tracking me the whole time. But my shutter speed is 1/50th of a second. If you're shooting 30 frames a second, then you want to go 160. If you're doing 60, you want to do 120, so on and so forth. At least double it. It's a good starting point. Now there is people out there that will say to you, yeah, this is old news. You don't need to do it like this. You can kind of go crazy with your frame rates. Listen, when you're starting out and you're a photographer moving into video, you've got to kind of learn this kind of basics and then learn to break it. A bit like when you were starting out in photography and you sort of do the basic compositional rules and then you look to break them. It's no different here. You're going to look to kind of do the basics, get it right, perfect it, and then break the rules where possible. So if you've got a frame rate that's 24, go 50th of a second for shooting the video. If you're going to get some slow motion at 120, unfortunately, you're going to go 250 on your shutter speed. Now that means if you're shooting in dark locations, your ISO is going to get higher and higher and higher, your f-stop is going to get lower and lower and lower, and of course, that's where your gear comes in.
Of course, lighting is incredibly important in both photography and videography, but the lighting setup in video guides the eye to a specific actor, prop, or part of a scene, and of course you've got moving visuals. The lighting reflects the psychology of the characters, and of course the overall mood, look, and feel of your film. I sometimes support my YouTube videos with lighting propped on top of the camera, for example, or 90 degrees off to one side, just in the form of LED light panels. This isn't complex lighting, and it certainly isn't meant for wow factor, but it does the job for what I need. Of course, my preferred lighting is natural light. It can greatly assist you in all spaces to film YouTube videos, for example, and I'm normally seeking out window light. In fact, I'll go as far as to actually shoot in that space if necessary.
Okay, now compositional tips are pretty easy. To be honest with you, compositionally, they're the same tips as they are in photography. You want to be thinking about your leading lines, your rule of thirds, your kind of compositional techniques, your framing. But don't just stick to those. Think outside of the box as well. Shoot down of you walking into a scene, for example, or maybe shoot through railings of you walking past. Or maybe it's put the camera outside and you're walking inside to the location. There's many things you can do to kind of just think outside of the box in terms of kind of how you're approaching the video. It can kind of help to keep the video engaging a little bit and people to kind of come along to the videos and enjoy the experience a little bit more. Like I said, I'm not an expert by any means, but these are things that I'm always keeping in the back of my mind as to, all right, how can I do something that's not just standing at waist height, eye level and filming because it's a bit boring. Vary up your tripod height and vary up your shots. For example, an establishing shot. This could be a shot that sets the scene, shows the landscape, a location, give context to where you are. Think aerial shot, tripod shot, time lapse perhaps. Think where I am most of all for this shot. Then you could get a couple of medium or wide shots, kind of like showing a little bit more of kind of where you are, more of the location. Don't forget to mix it up with some close-up shots. Zoom in on your focal length, maybe go 35, 50mm, 85, get some real nice detail. You could even go more than that if you wanted, but at this point I'd say look for things that are like documenting your feel, the dynamic of the space, maybe zipping up your bag, maybe it's textures or colours of the scene or the space. For me, buildings, texture, this kind of stuff, railings, knobs, handles, this kind of thing. Then you could get an abstract shot. This could be something like inside your bag. It could be a macro shot showing parts of the scene out of focus, some of it in 125mm perhaps, something like this. Handheld with a little bit of kind of movement in it that sets a kind of, I suppose, a bit of emotion to the viewer. You could do something creative that people don't think is coming. That could be, for example, a weird point of view or looking into a mirror and getting a reflection back. Walking up the staircase and you're kind of shooting back at yourself. All of the things that help kind of keep the viewer engaged. These are some tips I can give you. Hopefully some of them have helped. I don't know that much about videography, but it's the same kind of techniques that you would do in photography to make it engaging. But just think constant moving picture. So for editing video, for me, I primarily use Adobe products. So I just use the whole suite. I got a decent deal on the whole package and I keep using Premiere Pro. A lot of people moan about it, but I think a lot of those people are primarily going to be using kind of video as their main tool, money-making tool. For me, it's photography. So again, I've already paid for a package for Photoshop and Lightroom, and a little bit extra gets me all of the software. When it comes to post-processing, some people swear by shooting very flat, a bit like a raw photo. Shoot the file nice and flat. It allows you to apply a color grade to that footage. Now that's more advanced than I do. These days, I haven't got time to color grade. I haven't got time to go through. I'm not a videographer. I'm a photographer doing video. This is different. So for me, I just go with the Canon colors, and that's why I'm shooting with Canon. I just keep it as it is out of camera. Looks great, looks nice. I'm usually in kind of dark and moody locations anyway, so for me, I kind of just roll with it. You could apply color grades and styles to your images, maybe select a different color profile in camera, and there's a few different ones you could use, but primarily I do not. I actually do that though with my drone footage because I've set my drone up to shoot very flat because of the sensor size is small. So I shoot it flat and lift that to be level with my other cameras. I don't mess about with all of the color grades in all of my cameras, just so you understand. But you could. It depends on your end result and your final vision. You could ultimately do this yourself. Another thing to try as well is to try and use voiceovers or commentary in some of your video clips. I try and do this quite a bit. Especially if I'm out in a location and I want to break up kind of talking to the camera. It can hopefully keep the viewers engaged a little bit more. You can give some kind of like basic context or information, for example, about the architecture, the interior, but it really depends on what you're doing. For me, it's YouTube, so it's easy for me to do that. If it's a client video, a walkthrough of an architecture or an interior space, ultimately you're probably not going to want to be doing this, but they might ask for it, so you're going to want to know how.
For voiceover work, you could do this pre-studio, so pre-editing suite, by just recording in the field and actually dropping the audio from a clip, a video clip, directly into your editing suite. However, I actually use a microphone, a condenser microphone, which is usually used for podcasting as well, and I actually record directly into Premiere Pro. And to do this, you just literally press record once your mic's hooked up. And what you want to be doing is you want to be keeping the audio level consistent throughout. So in other words, syncing it with your other clips. All you do is you basically select the audio clip, you go to Window, Audio, you select it, enhance it, and that keeps the audio consistent throughout.
That just means when the viewer's like watching your video, the levels don't go up and down, up and down. Have you ever had to adjust your TV, your earphones in particular, when you're watching somebody's video? Well, that's the reason why. So you want to make sure that you're kind of trying to keep that consistent. I told you I'm no means an expert, but this is pretty much me in a nutshell when it comes to video. I've given you some tips and tricks. I hope they've helped you along the way. And until next time, bye-bye for now.